Welcome, listeners. I'm Lawrence Yang, family doctor, and with me today is guest Victoria. Is it Schmid?
Schmid, yes.
Victoria Schmid. And how did we meet? I think we met probably in some meetings that where I was representing Doctors of BC, and yourself. Tell us about the organization, Victoria, that you were representing.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. It's so great to be here today. So I'm the CEO for SwitchBC, which is a brand new organization. We've been around for about just over a year in BC, and we're a provincial organization with a mandate to support the health, safety, and well-being of healthcare workers across the province. So that's about 330,000 people who go to work every day to do amazing things in the healthcare sector, whether that's fold laundry and clean laundry to make sure that patients have the right bedding that they need, whether it's housekeepers that keep disease burden down in our facilities by cleaning handrails and elevators, nurses, physicians, porters, some occupations that you may not hear very much about in the healthcare setting, but we represent all of them across BC. And SWITCH stands for Safety, Wellbeing, Innovation, Training, and Collaboration in Healthcare. And so our real hope is to bring a provincial systemic lens to the work we're doing in this province. We recognize there's a ton of great work happening in the province, and what we need is to be able to bring that work together and focus it so that we can have some consolidated effort across the province to really raise the profile.
Wow. So safety, well-being, innovation, technology, training, and collaboration in healthcare. SWITCH. I love acronyms. I think we all do. So that's fantastic. So you guys take care of so many different people across, in the whole spectrum of health professionals, right?
Yeah.
Like you had mentioned porters, you'd mentioned kind of janitorial housekeeping staff. And there's physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners in there, respiratory therapists, everybody, right?
Yeah.
What a huge umbrella of people to take care of.
Yeah. And
it's like most people don't know that you guys exist yet.
That's right.
But you guys are pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did Switch form?
Yeah, so a little bit of history on Switch, and what actually makes Switch really special is that in the 2019 collective bargaining process, which is where the unions and the ministry come together to determine what the collective bargaining agreements will be, the unions came to the table with a really strong felt need that we were missing a provincial voice for worker safety, health, and well-being. And so they bargained as part of that process to say to the ministry, we really need a provincial organization. And so as part of that process, the ministry committed to funding SwitchBC, and then from 2019 in 2020 the board was brought together. We had COVID, of course, so things took a little longer than they normally would, but I was hired in early fall of 2021, and then brought a team together starting in the new year of 2022. And so the really special thing that allows us and will allow us to be really successful is that we have on our board equal representation from unions and employers. And then we have Doctors of BC there, as well as WorkSafe BC and the Ministry of Health. So when we make board commitments and when we make board decisions, we already have all the right players in agreement that this is the right way forward. And so that will allow us to really take out some of those challenges that we experience in the system now, which is where either the unions will come up with a good idea and then the employers will say, no, that doesn't work. Or the employers will come up with an idea and the unions will say, well, actually, you didn't really talk to the workers, and that isn't something that the workers can get behind. So by bringing those groups together at our board level, we can create that collaboration already. And then when we move forward with work, it's already supported jointly by all of our partners at the table.
It is a challenging task to get people to feel that any initiative is inclusive enough or fair enough. But it sounds like you guys have the right representation in your board to be able to do that.
Yeah, we definitely do. And just such committed people on our board to making this work and to really making a difference in the lives of healthcare workers across the province.
You know, I was attracted to your style of leadership immediately. The way that you show up, you know, you're open-minded, you're a listener. You know, you listen really well, and you kind of allow and you accept for whatever we bring forward. Like, I've been in some meetings with you where quite a few people were bringing up a lot of gripes or like being upset about things, as we are in this challenging system of healthcare, and you never defended or shut down their opinions. You were always inviting them to share more, and then accepting that that's part of the context and the lay of the land that you have to navigate. It's such a big challenge to do the work that you're doing in Switch, and it takes someone with great optimism, someone who has a lot of hope. Can you speak to us a little bit about how that came about for you, how your leadership style came about, and kind of how can you have that presence, and that I think is really, really awesome. And it's really good for healthcare, I think, to have people with your openness to complexity.
Thanks, Lawrence. I appreciate that. You know, I think that leadership is really about becoming more aware of who we are and how we are in spaces and how we show up in spaces. And so for me, my leadership journey is closely aligned with my parenting journey and my journey of self-discovery about who I am. And I really believe that all those things are intertwined, right? I think that we come to work and we don't just come to work and put on our professional hat and say, okay, now I'm going to do my work. All those things in our lives bleed together, and the learnings from each really bleed into each other, right? And so I would say that really two key pieces that really have taught me a lot about leadership was when my very first management job, the director that I was reporting to in that position at the time, part of my orientation for that job was that I wasn't actually allowed to start my management job until I had spent a whole shift with each of the different positions in the area that I was managing. And at that time, I was working as a manager for food and nutrition services. And so I was responsible for the dietitians as well as for all of the food delivery in the hospital. And so I spent a day with the food deliverers, taking trays up and talking with patients and making sure all the patients got the right food. I spent a day washing dishes. I spent a day setting trays together on the food assembly line. I spent a day with the cook, cooking mashed potatoes and scrambled eggs in the morning. I spent a day with the delivery woman, taking frozen boxes off the truck and putting them in the freezers. And so what I really learned in that space was you actually have no idea what the work is unless you're actually doing the work. And that has really stayed with me as a leader, so that when I'm tempted to jump in and throw out a solution, I always am reminded that unless I'm actually the person in that work, I'm probably not the best situated to bring a solution forward. And so that's really shaped my passion and commitment to always listen to the people who do the work. So what is it that the workers are telling us about their work? The second piece of advice that I got from one of my leaders was that you should always have your biggest naysayers at the table. So no matter what you're trying to move forward, always make sure your biggest naysayers are invited to the table to help you shape that. Because if you can work through the things that they're bringing to the table, the challenges that they're bringing, and they're all true and real challenges. people's experience or their experience, right? There is no reality, it's only perception. And that's why listening to what people bring forward and hearing from them, and then having them help you create a plan that they feel can address their needs, or at least they can feel their needs were heard and they can understand why you move forward in a certain way, allows you to manage the need that we all have to feel heard and to feel like what we have to say and that our work is important. And so I really believe strongly in that. And I think that the only way to fix our system as we move forward is actually to create autonomy for our workers to fix the problems that they know so well, and they know the solutions to them.
I love that. So keep those who kind of bring opposing opinions at the table. And then you said the reason for that is because is it because the outcome will be better because of their opposing ideas?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think quite often we all have blinders, right? And so I'm reading Adaptive Leadership right now, which is an older book, but it has been so illuminating for me. And one of the biggest things they talk about is how, as a leader, do you dance on the dance floor? So you're involved in the work, but you also take the time to get up on the balcony and observe how things are happening on the dance floor. And I think that's a big piece on how do we be involved in the work, but also get a big enough perspective that we see more than what we just typically tend to see, right? I think it's really important to realize that no matter how much we know, how much experience or intelligence we have, we never see the whole picture. And so the more people you can bring to the table, the more ideas you can bring to the table, the better the solution is that you're going to be able to create.
What I'm hearing from you is that you have a grounding humility combined with, optimism. So you're optimistic that you can find a way forward, but you're also humble enough to know that you don't have all the answers, and you're inviting complexity to the table, complexity and a diversity of opinions and diversity of personalities. So often in healthcare, what we see is that we have to go fast. If we don't go fast, we're not doing anything. And if we want to go fast, we have to cut some people off.
Yeah.
There's a lot of siloing that occurs in healthcare because that particular opinion is outside of what we feel we can deal with our capacity right now. So we're just going to have to ignore it. But I don't feel like you take that approach at all. And
yeah, I think that our desire to go fast makes us forget that actually in order to truly go fast, we actually have to go slow first, right? And we have to build relationships, and we have to collaborate, and we have to bring in all those voices. And that will slow us down at the beginning, but it actually will allow us to go faster at the end, right? And so I think that we often forget that true success lies in actually being able to create a solution that is embraced by everyone and is successful. And so sometimes we rush through that collaboration phase. We go to implement something, and then we find out that people are actually not ready for it. The fears that we heard are actually real. It's not just one person saying this is stupid. There's actually a big sentiment around that. And so we end up then having to redo or go back to the drawing board, right? And I think about a big project I was involved when I first moved to BC to Island Health, and we pushed forward trying to get this out the door really quickly. And then we were just met with so much resistance. And now they've gone back and done the same project just a couple of years ago, and the environment was completely different. It was invited, people were asking for the change, and so it's been accepted, and they've been able to implement rather quickly, right? So I think that there's just in our desire to move fast and in our need to move fast, we have to balance that with also our knowledge that you actually can't move fast if you don't have the proper infrastructure of trust and collaboration to allow you to move quickly, right?
When I've witnessed you in meetings, oftentimes I see you just being super authentic, just being you. And when you don't know how to do something, you just let people know, I don't know, but we're going to find out. And you have that. It's so rare to see that in some leaders, and it's I mean, I think people are coming to that understanding that as a leader, I don't need to know everything.
Yeah.
The answers don't need to come from me. But it's still refreshing to see it from you. And did you have a mentor who kind of showed you that, or was there some type of school or training that you did that taught you more about how to show up as a leader?
Yeah, you know what I would say is that I have the most amazing mentor in the world, Dr. Katrina McGrath. She has her PhD in nursing, and she was a VP in Saskatchewan. She's now moved back out to Ontario as a chief nursing officer. But what I would say that Katrina taught me was always hire people that are smarter than yourself, right? And I remember when I first started working with Katrina, I really struggled with imposter syndrome. And I remember one day chatting with her in one of our one-to-ones, and I said, I just really struggle with not feeling like I have the answers or I'm smart enough to be in this job. And I remember her laughing, and she said, that's the whole point. You don't have to have all the answers. You actually don't have all the answers. The people who are doing the work are the ones that have the answers. Your job is to facilitate getting those answers to a place where we can implement them. And so, I love that saying. I don't know if it was Einstein who said it, but he said, I have no particular talent. I'm just really curious, right? And so I think about that, and I think, what I bring to the table is not intelligence or expertise. What I bring to the table is the ability to connect the right people, to bring voice forward. Voice is so important to me. And how do we give people who know the solutions and know the right way forward, how do we give them voice and autonomy to create the right way forward for us?
So kind of your relationship building is actually one of your top assets as a leader, by kind of connecting the gaps with those people who might be able to better build something to fill those gaps. Did you always know that you wanted to be a CEO? When you were 12, were you like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be a CEO one day?
No, not at all. And actually, I'm the third of 3 daughters. And so I grew up always having my older sisters boss me around and tell me what to do. So probably there's a bit in that where I was like, oh my God, someday I just want to be able to not be told what to do all the time. But I think if you'd asked me at 12, I would have said I wanted to be an accountant. My favorite thing as a kid was to get a form and fill out a form. I loved that. And my sister and I used to pretend we were accountants, and so I think even all the way through till probably grade 10, 11, I was going to be an accountant. And thank God, because let me tell you, I'm not good with numbers. So it's very good that I never became an accountant. And it wasn't till grade 12 where I started to think about really moving into some type of position where I could help people, and that became really a large part of what I wanted to do. And then in university, I got accepted into nursing, and I got accepted into nutrition. And I took nutrition because there weren't night shifts. When you're a dietitian, you don't usually work night shifts. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. But I didn't work very long as a dietitian, and I'll tell you why. I grew very despondent over the lack of voice. And so one of the stories that has really pushed me in my leadership journey was we had a patient in the ICU that I was treating with total parental nutrition. And he was a homeless gentleman named Carl, and we had picked him up off the streets over the holidays, and this was in Prince George. And so he was very emaciated, came in lots of frostbite, and so we were trying to kind of bring him back, give him some nutrition, and I had written out the orders for his TPN, and one of the locum physicians came in crossed out my orders and wrote his own orders.
Hmm.
And so I came back the next day and I wrote the orders in again, and it happened again. And so I waited around till the physician came in, and I said, I'm curious, because we know that we don't want refeeding syndrome in this gentleman. He's very emaciated. And the physician said, you're the dietitian, I'm the doctor, I will write the orders.
Wow.
And so I talked to other physicians in the ICU who didn't feel like they could go against this physician. I went all the way up the chain and didn't get any help. And 4 days later, when I came in, Carl had passed away. And we had lost him from refeeding syndrome. And so that has stayed with me through my whole career, because I knew as a practitioner what the right thing to do was, and I didn't have voice. And whether that's voice to navigate expertise with colleagues, whether it's voice to navigate expertise with management to say we have a solution that works, we need to create systems that have channels for voice, because that's actually where the solutions come from. And those are the people providing care, the people doing those services in the front line, the security officers who deal every day with the people coming into our system who are aggravated and violent. They're the ones that know the solutions to help fixing the problems that we have.
You've used the term voice many times, and I'm getting to understand what it means. It's like having a space where any person is able to express their perspective and be heard by those in positional power, kind of.
Definitely. Yeah. And so for me, psychological safety, which I think is a very overused term, and again, it's one of those terms like culture where people roll their eyes when they hear it, because it's really hard to say, what is this? But for me, psychological safety is simply about allowing people to have voice. So giving people safe environments where you can raise your concerns or your ideas, and then creating the environment where those ideas are heard and responded to. And it doesn't mean we have to do everything that people bring forward. And people that bring forward ideas don't expect us to implement all their ideas, but they do expect to be heard. They do expect to be acknowledged, and they do expect us to explain to them why we can't put their idea into action if that's not the way we can move forward with at this time, right? And I think sometimes we get really scared as leaders that if we invite feedback, then we're going to have to, people are going to say, oh, we want a whole floor dedicated just to couches where staff can hang out. That's not what people are bringing forward, right? Those aren't we're really scared that the ideas people are bringing forward are going to cost a ton of money, or they're going to make us do really big things. But that's not actually what we see when we invite people to bring forward ideas. They actually bring forward really practical ideas of what can fix things for themselves and their patients. And those ideas often don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah. When I'm with my physician colleagues and nurse colleagues in the hospital, I often hear them say, if we just did this easy fix, we could have this change. But they often don't know where to go and who's going to listen to them. And they've had experiences where they've tried to speak up in the past, and then they just got shut down or ignored. And then so people become despondent. They lose hope. They lose a lot of hope. And I think we need leaders in our system now who do have hope, do have optimism, have some energy, some capacity. You're not the all-knowing person, as we just mentioned, but how might a leader within our system, let's say a nursing leader or a physician leader in a hospital, how might they maintain their optimism and their hope in the context of this overwhelm right now that we're having? And this overwhelm is often where there's their teams are short-staffed a lot of times. I know you don't have the answers, but what have you heard?
Yeah, so I think first of all, what I just want to say is to the healthcare workers, and that includes all of our leaders in healthcare as well, to all of those healthcare workers who continue to show up day after day in this current system right now. Just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am not working frontline right now, but I have heard so many stories and so many experiences of what it's like to be in the system right now, to provide care in the system, to provide security services, to provide phlebotomy services, and to lead in the system right now. And I don't think it's anything short of working through a system that is crumbling. And so I have nothing but immense gratitude and appreciation for the people who show up every day to try to do the right thing in the midst of all the challenges. And so I don't want us to try to say in any trite way to be hopeful and to hold on to hope because things are going to get better. I'm not sure things are actually going to get better, and certainly not in the short run. Things are not going to get better. I think things are going to be really difficult for us for the next 5 years, at least in healthcare. There's no one coming to save us. This is our problem. We got ourselves into this mess through lots of different things. Some things were out of our control, some things were within our control, but here we are, and it does no good at this point to sling mud at why we're here. Now we need everyone's energy to move us out of this, to say, what are those ideas we're hearing from our teams? And so I'm an eternal optimist, and so for me, the hope that I have is because I actually know that the people in the system have the solutions that we need. And so I know things feel very big right now. And I know there's lots of small things we can do to fix at least some of what we're in. And so there's no quick fix, but I do believe that we have to remain optimistic because one of the things that I'm most committed to, and one of the reasons why I'm most grateful to be Canadian, is because we have a healthcare system that even with the issues that it has, provides full access to everyone. And I get it. There's lots of times where our access isn't great, where if you are a racialized Canadian or Indigenous, for sure, your access is not as good as other people. But at least we don't make people pay and see people going bankrupt because of trying to get access to healthcare services. So I believe so strongly in the need for us to maintain a publicly funded and publicly accessible healthcare system. And I know that there's so many other people in the system that are committed to that same thing. To the physicians that I talk to who say this, it's so important that we are able to maintain this, to the nurses who are so committed to providing great care in every area that they work. And so I think that the only way through this is to maintain hope. If we become despondent, we lose so much. And I know that it is really hard not to be despondent in this time. I've been reading so much about burnout lately, and burnout is so true. And we're seeing hugely increasing numbers in the practitioners who are reporting that they're burnt out right now. That is real, and we need to make system changes to help support people not to get burnt out. I refuse to talk about individual resilience anymore. For me, it's all about system resilience. How are we creating resilient organizations that support our nurse leaders, our physician leaders, all of our leaders to come in and to be able to have hope? What does that look like? And I think there's some really good solutions out there. I think, though, that we're going to have to be brave in innovating, because we really suck at innovating in healthcare. We do not like to innovate. It requires us being okay with failure, and we're not okay with failure in healthcare, right? So I really think that if people can hold on to hope by recognizing that the solutions are in the people that they work with, we will get through this. But it's going to require everyone to really walk through a difficult time for a while.
You know, that really resonates. I identify as someone who's been burnt out, and many of us have. And I remember when I was burnt out, I had that feeling that I was in this alone, that I was kind of like, I was like a martyr for the system.
Yes.
I was trying to patch all the gaps in the system,
Yeah.
and no one else was patching them. And and in that patching of them, I felt that no one else saw the gaps.
Yeah.
I also felt that no one else cared about the gaps, and that I was the only one that cared. And so, but now I'm reflecting back, and after actually bridging silos intentionally with people, I realized that I was not alone, that there are thousands of healthcare professionals who see the gaps, and they're just not putting their heads together.
Yeah.
They're not actually finding those synergies where they could actually have ideas and passion that come together to actually figure out, oh, in order to fix that particular wait time, all we need to do is do this new communication process or something.
Yeah.
And so, since I've gone into quality improvement, there's a lot of quality improvement culture things that I find really hope giving.
Yeah.
They really encourage people to cross silos and to share ideas, and then actually try simple things out. And like you said, be okay with failure.
Yeah.
And to not let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can do something that's just good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that not everything needs to cost money.
Yeah.
That it could just be about leveraging relationships sometimes to improve things for other people. So I really resonate with that message of the answers do lie in the people, and that I encourage any listener out there who's in some type of leadership position to not lose hope that there are no answers, that within the complexity there are those champions that you should try to reach out to and try to find and discover these champions who actually still have the energy and have the answers. There's this concept, and it kind of relates to what you had said earlier about keep the naysayers at the table. Sometimes there's a lot of people with a lot of passion, but that passion comes with a lot of negativity, a lot of hurt and pain. What have you learned about, you know, the goodness in that, the potential in someone who comes with a lot of hurt and pain from the health system, but comes with a lot of passion too?
You know, I see that so much, especially right now, where, to your point, a lot of people really are burnt out right now. And yet you see them continuing to show up, and I'm like, where does this energy come from? And to your point, if you can be patient enough and put on your Teflon vest sometimes, because sometimes it requires sitting and listening to things that you don't necessarily want to hear, right? And it requires patience to let people unpack what's going on for them. But if you can do that, you can get to what it is that's driving people, right? And that's the magic, is saying, okay, I hear that things are really difficult right now. I hear that your experience has been really horrific. And yet I see in you this huge passion to make a difference in your workplace. And so what are some things that we can do to unleash that passion and allow you to feel like you have some control over the challenges you face, and to feel some creativity and joy again, to allow you to let go of that negativity that you hold on to, right? And I think sometimes, particularly if we've been in the system for a really long time and we've only ever encountered challenges and it just feels hard all the time, we keep at it because there is that little light in us that says we need to fix this, it needs to be better. But our negativity is so big around us that we really push people away, right? And because of that, those are the people that we typically don't invite to the table, right? Those are the people that we typically are like, oh man, let's hope so-and-so doesn't speak up at the meeting today because we know what that rant is going to look like, right? Where really we need to create space for that, and we need to hear people, because all of us as humans, we want to feel heard. We want to feel like we bring something to the problem at hand, and that we can be part of the solution. And when we continue to shut those people out just because what they are bringing isn't necessarily what we want to hear right now, we do a whole disservice, because they do have answers and they do have solutions. we just need to have the time and the patience to let them work through what some of that exterior negativity might be for them, right?
What might you say to someone, and you can pass if you need to on that. What would you say to someone who says, we don't have enough time to take care of that one person's feelings and that one person's perspectives that don't really apply to the general average membership? Like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, right? And I think that if we forget that the work of healthcare is actually about people, we can very quickly overlook those people, right? And I think that if you are in healthcare right now and you don't have the bandwidth anymore to feel for people or feel with people, you're in a really dangerous place. And I hate to say that because I know that actually probably the majority of our people are there. And if we tell all those people to take some time away to figure out how to work through that and how to heal, we're going to lose a lot of people. So I don't want to say that, but at the same time, we all got into healthcare because we care about other people, right? We wanted to make a difference. And so when we can come to a table with colleagues and not be concerned that someone has showed up for the last 6 meetings with a massive black cloud over their head, that's a sad place for us to be. Yeah. Because I really strongly believe that none of us get ahead unless we all get ahead together. And so if we need to move forward and leave people behind, I think that's a really, really dangerous place to be, and we don't want to do it very often at all. And we certainly don't want to do it without making multiple efforts to bring that person along.
When you speak like that, and when that really resonates with what I believe Canadian healthcare was, the ethos that Canadian healthcare was designed with, that people aren't supposed to be left behind, that we're supposed to have services that are inclusive and that everybody ought to have access. So yeah, I really resonate with that. Yeah, I think it was a really bad, 2022 for me was a really bad year to be Canadian. There were 3 things that kind of crumbled that are really kind of categorically Canadian. So the Canadian flag, given the freedom convoys, I have a really hard time feeling proud about the Canadian flag anymore, right? And so for me now, when I see that Canadian flag, I get there's a lot of emotion going on there, right? Particularly when it was used in kind of the anti-vaccine protests and stuff. And, for those of us that worked so hard trying to get vaccine out. And so, and then the second thing was Hockey Canada. So with all of the allegations of sexual abuse in the Hockey Canada structure, that was super disheartening for me, for a country that idolizes our hockey players and where hockey is an institution. And then thirdly, just the total crumbling of healthcare this year as we've come out of the pandemic, and the hope that we were going to come out of this pandemic and things were going to get back to whatever, then whether it's the new normal or get back to normal or get back to something different. Instead, healthcare is kind of crumbling, right? And so for me, those are 3 really fundamentally Canadian things that I feel in 2022 really took a bashing. And so, I think about what is it that keeps us coming back to say, this country is worth fighting for. And so how do we start to have conversations that start to raise the polarization that's occurring, right? We don't want to become like America and have these polarized conversations. How do we bring the right tables together, to your point, to break down those silos in healthcare? Because we can never fix this if we don't break down the silos of people who are all over the place doing great things, but not connecting and recognizing the interface of what they're doing, right? And so that's a really, really important thing for us to think about. And that's where I think SwitchBC can be a real
voice in the province and a chance to really bring people together to say, you guys over here are super passionate about this, you guys are working on this, let's bring you together and see what we're able to accomplish, and then how can we spread that across the whole system, right? And I've been so encouraged by the amount of people that have reached out to me that have been saying, hey, we're working on this small project, and these are the results we're getting, let's have a chat, because I think this could be something really cool. And so there's so many people in the system that care so deeply, and I really hope that our work at Switch is to raise that voice and to give them a platform and to support them to really make that work successful and spread it, because that's what we need right now. Is we need people with those solutions who are doing the work to bring that work forward so that we can help spread it and make it really successful.
And within there'll be some big solutions, but there'll also be some like small solutions that really apply to all the different local needs. You'd spoken a little bit about reliable organizations. How does that apply to your work? Yeah,
so what I would say is my background is quality and safety. So I'm a huge quality improvement geek, and I actually think that quality improvement is actually the answer to a lot of what we're dealing with. So when we give frontline workers the knowledge to fix their own issues, like I said before, that's how we're going to fix this system, right? And so high reliable systems are systems where you can fix things in the moment, where you are able to escalate things quickly, and your system has feedback, and you actually are anticipating what's going to go wrong next, and you catch it before it goes wrong. So one of the things that I led the implementation of in Saskatchewan was something called the safety alert system. And what we actually implemented in our health authority was a phone-in system. So when you saw a safety concern, instead of going to your computer, trying to look, first of all, you have to log in with your username, right? Then you have to find the right place where you go to log in safety events. And then you have to log in there, and hopefully you haven't forgotten your password, because if you have, then you have to say forgot password, then you have to go through that whole process. By then, if you're still committed to logging in that safety concern, you can go through the whole long process of it. But what we did in Saskatchewan was we created a phone-in system. So first of all, we said, okay, we're going to have 4 different levels of events, and we brought together staff and patient safety. So we said, we're going to talk about big S safety. We're not going to differentiate between staff and patient safety, because we know it's interlinked, and we know that the solutions are often the same, and we know that the people impacted are often the same. So we are going to create a system where 1 is a near miss or a good catch. Nothing's happened yet, but we want people to know about it so that we can learn from it, so that we can build a highly reliable organization. The 4th level is the highest level, where someone has been injured. And at that level, there is a definite leadership response that has to happen. And so the way we had set it up was, if you called in and said that someone had been critically injured, whether it was a patient or a staff member, that call would come in to the call center. The call center would log it. The call center then called the VP on call, and that VP had 20 minutes to connect with that team, to support them in their problem solving, to mitigate, to do disclosure, to support the people involved. And that accountability was built into our weekly reporting to the CEO, where we said we had this many 4 events, and this many times the VP showed up on time and supported the team. And we were very clear, your role as a leader coming into that situation was not to fix the problem. Your role was to say, what are the barriers I need to remove to allow you to fix this problem? And in implementing that, what we were able to do was to provide voice. And so people felt that they could raise safety concerns, that they actually could get help, that they actually could make a difference. And I think that that's the piece, is in our need to change the system, the most dangerous thing we can do is have a bunch of leaders sitting around the table trying to create a solution. That's not what we need to do. What we need to do as leaders is to say to people, what are the solutions you need, and how do we remove barriers? The only function I have as a leader in a system is to remove barriers. And if I can't remove barriers for my teams when they bring forward ideas, then I probably should get out of the way and let someone else into that leadership position, right? Because that's what we need to do as leaders. And so we need systems If we want to have high reliable organizations, we need to have systems that actually A, flag concerns, B, do something about it, C, hold leaders accountable for their role in the system. And that means a fundamental reshifting of what we believe about leadership, of what we believe that the leader's role in the system is.
Leaders are supposed to fix it. They're supposed to swoop down and fix our problems.
We love that in healthcare, and it goes back to your point around feeling like you need to sacrifice yourself for the system, right? We love it when we love to put on our capes and run in and rescue people, right? And that's we actually glorify sacrifice in healthcare, right? So the more hours you work, the more times you don't take vacation, the more times you rush in to save a situation, the more we glorify you, right? And the more you sacrifice yourself for your job, the more we
sacrifice your family,
yes,
your children.
Exactly. And you know what? It took for me the pandemic, where I moved through the pandemic and did all those things around sacrifice. And then I started to see the impact on my kids. And I started to realize what my sacrifice for work had done to my children, and it scared the heck out of me. And I said, you know what, this can't be right. It can't be right that it has to be either or. We need to create resilient systems where I can go to work and give my all and be creative and have passion and energy, but I can still go home and do the same things at home with my family because they need me as well. And it was through that really made me take a step back and say, what is this? What am I doing this for? Because if I don't have my family, it's not worth it, right? And I think we have a whole generation now of kids who for 3 years have been through the pandemic with many of us as parents who didn't necessarily realize the harm that we were inflicting on our kids through the work that we were doing in healthcare in particular. Because I looked around any room when I was on a 6 a.m. Zoom call with my colleagues, and the majority of them had kids. The majority of them were shuffling, caring for parents, caring for kids, and still trying to run and support a system that was in the midst of a pandemic. And so, you know, I think we have a lot of harm that we've inflicted on the system that we need to undo. And we also need to totally shift our thinking around sacrifice. You cannot serve if you are depleted. There's nothing more to give. And also what you're giving is shit. Sorry for my language, but seriously, when we're depleted, we have no creativity. We have no passion. We can't see past our own selves when we're in that depleted state. And so we have a responsibility to ourselves to check in, and the system has a responsibility to check in with the people in the system to say, hey, where are you at? What can we do to support you? What does good look like for you? And how do we help you through that? Because we can't keep going forward like we are on the backs of the people who are basically really sacrificing themselves for the system right now.
That resonates a lot. And if I put together the things that you said, no leader is going to be able to swoop down and change and save our systems. And if I am a frontline health worker who is not feeling well or not feeling supported, the only people who can help me is myself. No one is coming to save me. So what does it look like potentially for physicians and nurses to save themselves, to make their local workplace better? If they have a leader who doesn't choose to be proximate, as you were talking about, you were going to see what each of the people that you were leading are doing. If we don't have leaders who don't come proximate, how might we save ourselves? Like, what are our recourses? What do we do?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really hard situation to be in, for sure. When you feel particularly unsupported by your immediate leader, that's a really, really hard place to be, and it's super demoralizing. And the amount of work you have to do to work around that leader is a lot. But if you really are passionate about making change, those are the things that you have to do. Is you do have to figure out, who do you go to? Do you have a leader in Doctors of BC that you can talk to? Do you have a leader in the nursing profession that you can talk to? Maybe it's the college, maybe it's just another leader that you know in the system that you have a relationship with that you can talk to. You know, email me. My email's on the SwitchBC website. But whatever you do, please don't give up. And that would be what I would say to you is, number one, take care of yourself, whether that means whatever type of wellness you need to adopt for yourself. Give yourself permission to be kind and compassionate to yourself. You can only continue in this system if you do that. If not, you will totally get burnt out if you're not already. And you're not going to be able to help your colleagues if you're in that position. So what I would say to people is, give yourself permission, let go of the guilt of taking care of yourself. That is so important right now. And then look for ways around the challenges that you're facing. So reach out to someone else. And I'm serious, I totally would love to hear from people. And then one of my favorite things to do is actually trying to connect people to the right people to help them be able to be successful. So that's what I think we really need in our system, is connectors, where people say, I have this challenge, I'm not getting anywhere with where I'm at. Then how do we actually connect you in with someone that can help you? Your quality and safety department in your organization often has people that will be willing to help you. And often those leaders then can go in and support the operational leaders to come up with a solution. So reach out in your organization, reach out outside your organization, but number one, take care of yourself. And then number two, hopefully that gives you the energy to do a bit of that runaround that you sometimes need to do in the system, because the system is really siloed, and you can get stuck with a leader that this isn't their number one priority to support you and your ideas, right?
Yeah. I remember one of the first steps of me coming out of my own burnout was me actually figuring out who the CEO of my health authority was. I actually didn't know. And then I actually sought them out, went up to them at a meeting, and I said, I'm struggling here to create the good outcomes that I really hope to come out. And that one conversation led me to learn about quality improvement, because my CEO knew about the quality improvement education resources there, the physician QI program. And then that connected me to a whole support network of physicians from different specialties who were all struggling with very similar challenges in burnout and frustration with the system. And then we started to just kind of form natural support systems for each other, and supporting, like when my hope is low, I'll tap into that network and bring it back up and stuff. And now we're on this group called Synergy Hub, and thank you for being part of that too, where we try to encourage each other to stay hopeful and positive as we go forward. You spoke about one of your first challenging experiences where you had no voice. You were a dietitian, and there was a critical care physician who kind of used traditional historical medical hierarchy to silence your, just drawing a line through your stuff and putting their own stuff there. I really see that hierarchy is often damaging to quality within our system. And more I'm reading about, I guess, different ways of how hierarchy works. Or there's like a concept called new power, which is old power. Old power being more command and control structures that might work maybe in the military. But in some complex systems where, as you said, every level needs to be empowered, that old power doesn't work anymore. How do you now look at culture, health professional culture? What would be a better ideal for health professional culture of the future to work, such that someone like you would have voice in the future to reduce poor outcomes?
You know, I think it's actually going to be this work we do around psychological safety, right? So I think in systems where you feel safe to bring ideas forward, where you feel safe to speak your mind, where you feel safe to raise concerns. And alternatively, in systems where our leaders feel safe to fail, where our leaders feel safe to not know everything, and where our leaders feel safe to also speak up to their leaders. Those are the systems that we need. And so the shift we really need is to really understand how our behaviors contribute to a culture of psychological safety. So how is it that we lead in a way that allows that voice that I talked about, that allows people to come into the room and we remove some of those power differentials. So I mentioned my mentor, Katrina McGrath, before, and another piece of advice that she always gave me was, when you are the one in the room with the highest power gradient, your whole job is to bring your level of power down so that people can feel safe and heard in that room. And so it's not the job of the people who have less power to speak up or to try to break down the barriers to be heard. As leaders with power, for those of us with power and privilege, and this goes outside of just healthcare work too, this goes into our work in community and in equity and diversity. It's for those of us with power and privilege, it's our job to make sure that we create safe environments and we create space where others can have voice and where others can step in and come to the table as well. And so I think about that quite often and how we need to change how we lead in this system and create bigger tables for more voice and for more diversity at the table, so that we can hear the voices of the people who do the work, of the people who look at the work differently than we do. And for us as leaders to fundamentally understand ourselves and how we show up in spaces. And so, is it my ego that drives me when I come to work? Is it my fear that drives me? Or am I really coming to work with hope and with the belief that my whole job is to be a facilitator of good things to happen in the system? And I think that can fundamentally transform hierarchy. So when we can let go of fear and ego in the system as leaders, we can open up new opportunities to hear voice, and we can open up new opportunities to get out there and connect with the people who have the answers to the solutions that we need.
Wow. You're asking physicians who work their whole lives to be the best and to know everything that they can, to give up ego and to give up anxiety, fear. It sounds like it's almost like a spiritual transformation that needs to occur.
It is. I actually really do think it is, right? And I think for me, my journey in life, and that's why I started out at the beginning saying that who we are at work, who we are at home as a parent or a partner, who we are in our community, those things are all really enmeshed. And for me, the more I learn about myself as a person, the better leader I become, the better parent I become, the better partner I become, and the better community member I become. And I think that's the piece about it, is really that awareness of how am I impacting the people around me? And how do I want to impact the people around me? You know, there's that saying, people never remember what you do, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And for me, that has always been a guiding light for me, because I think that the way through is together, and people aren't going to want to come with us if we make them feel shitty, or if we make them feel like we know more than they do. We all have expertise, we all have knowledge, and we all have areas where we don't have expertise and knowledge. And so we need everyone to come to the table, and we don't need anyone that knows all of it, because that's why we have a big table, so that we can get everyone around the table, and together we can create the very best solution for healthcare in BC.
in 2018, the Quality Forum, Christina Krause, she brought in Michael West from the King's Fund. Were
That's
you
right.
there?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was awesome. And he spoke about a topic called compassionate leadership.
yeah,
And then one of the things he said that leaders ought to be mindful about how they show up in this space, very
Yeah.
similar to what you said. And one of the things he said is that two behaviors most damaging to compassionate cultures. The first one was blaming, so just pointing fingers and like attributing one person or one department to all the problems as a cause of all the problems. So misattribution. And then the other one was gossiping.
Yeah.
Rumor mills, speaking about things that are not founded in fact, and just kind of sending negativity through the culture. And I found that was a powerful and simple guide, just these two behaviors to avoid, to maintain a compassionate culture. And then on reflection, when we blame and attribute all problems in a system to one or two people, that kind of absolves us of any responsibility for fixing the problem. Totally. It's their fault. Yeah. So it's kind of like an easy way out. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I'm a huge fan of Deming and his systems theory, right? And so what we know is that very rarely is it ever anyone's fault. The system, Paul Batalden said it so well, the system's perfectly designed to get the results it gets, right? And so when we have leaders who don't actually have a good knowledge or acceptance of systems theory, we very quickly go to blaming individuals because it's fast, it's quick, and we can say the problem's dealt with. Yep, we've re-educated that physician. Yep, we sent that nurse to anti-harassment school, problem solved. That's not actually the problem, and you haven't actually solved the problem. In order to solve that problem, you're actually going to need to pull together the people who are part of that team and really figure out what's going on to really get to the solution to that problem. So when you unpack it, and this is why I love quality improvement so much, whatever tool you use, whether it's a fishbone diagram or the 5 whys or whatever, right? You really start to say, what is the actual cause of what's going on? And it's rarely what we actually land on first. When you land on something, you should always say, okay, this is why that happened. Okay, well, why did that happen? And then unpack that and move it down, and you will always get to a system problem, right? And so I think in our inability to have just culture in healthcare in particular, we very quickly shift to individual blame because, to your point, it's quick, it's fast, we're done, we can close that investigation. It takes way longer and way more energy to actually say, whoa, actually, this is a system issue and we need to figure out how we're going to actually fix the system. And so I totally agree with you. And I think that also the gossip piece also comes back to fear, I think. Like, we really struggle in healthcare to have conflict and to have conversations that are hard with people, right? Like, it's really hard for us to go to someone and say, I'm curious about what you said in that meeting, because the way it landed for me was this, and I'm just really curious because I know you and I know you wouldn't want to hurt me, but that was the way it landed. Can you help me understand, right? And that's a really hard thing to do. And or on the flip side of that, we often don't want to go to someone and say, hey, I need you to know your behavior today was unacceptable. And we need to discuss a little bit further what's going on for you. What can I do to support you? But actually, you can't show up in that way and behave in that way. That's not okay. We really struggle with that. We'd rather go to someone else and say, oh my God, did you see what Lawrence said in that meeting? Can you believe he actually did that? And then that spins through and becomes this big thing, right? Instead of that face-to-face conversation and holding people accountable for their behaviors in a very respectful and supportive way, but we still have to hold people accountable. I want to kind of wrap this conversation up, and I want to close because you got me thinking more about what Michael West said about compassionate leadership. And he said that compassionate leaders are optimistic, they're courageous, they lean into hard conversation, they're silo bridging, they try to bring different silos together. They choose to attend, to be proximate to people. They listen with fascination, and then they take intelligent action. And intelligent action is defined as some team-based, sustainable action. I think you exemplify that, Victoria, and I'm excited. Switch is one of the organizations that has so many silos bridged together. I'm really excited about what you all might be able to do in collaboration with Everybody Ministry, Doctors of BC, and all the other organizations. I'm honored that you joined us today on the podcast. You did have a question for me before we started. How long have I been doing this? I think it was 2018 was the first episode, right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I have a fun story behind it. I'm a big mixed martial arts fan, so I'd actually gone down into California, and I trained with a fighter named Ronda Rousey at the time.
Yes.
Yes, and Ronda Rousey auctioned off her old car, the car that she used to live in as she was a poor student training for the Olympics in 2008. And I bought her car and I turned it into a podcast studio. So I hooked up with cameras, and my first couple episodes with Dr. Kurt Smetcher and with some patient partners, we held it inside that vehicle. Since the pandemic, we weren't able to do it. Yeah, and so here we are in this format, but
well, that's an awesome story, Lance, and thank you so much for having me. I think for me, I'm just so grateful. I wouldn't be here without the amazing people that are in our healthcare system, and I just feel so grateful to be in a place to be able to support what's happening, the good things happening in the healthcare system right now. And I believe so strongly that we have such amazing, talented, passionate people. And I just feel so strongly that the role of SwitchBC is to support those people. And the team we have at Switch is just a team of amazing people that feel the same way. And so I'm just really excited by the opportunities that are ahead of us and by the partnerships. So thank you so much for having me today.
I feel the difference when I work with your team members. There's always this optimism. They're always excited, and I'm like, oh, that's the energy we need in this system.
Yeah, definitely.
We have a restaurant to go to on and She.
Yes. Yes.